I'm back, baby.
When it comes to development hell, Dead Island 2 stands up there with the best of them. Dambuster Studios really said hold my beer and did one of the most meta moves possible. Wait until the game is on the brink of death before bringing it back to life. Now that's what I call dedication to your craft. Of course, the obvious follow-up question would be, is it any good? Taking place 15 years after the events of the first game, the story premise is simple. You are part of a select lucky few survivors who are airplane bound towards a safe haven for the uninfected. Naturally, things go side up real quick, and that's when you are tasked with picking your character from one of 6 slayers, all of which come with individual personalities, slightly differing stats, and a few unique perks to distinguish themselves from each other. After picking your character and going through the prologue, you get bitten while trying to save some dork who clearly didn't eat his Flintstone Vita gummies as a child, setting up the plot for the rest of the game. Find a cure before you turn into
I was going to foot him.
Dead Island 2 does quite a lot of things well, and where it shines brightly. This is arguably the best combat system in any zombie game to date, with all the different weapons in the game feeling like they matter in some kind of meaningful way. Even at times where I ran out of the weapon type I preferred, say one-handed blunt weapons, I never rolled my eyes that I had to use something else in the meantime. Plus, kicking zombies off a rooftop will never not feel like I'm in a Michael Bay movie. Expanding on that, the gore and damage system in this game is truly one of a kind. Not only do I appreciate and respect that they had the cojones to include as much gratuitous violence as they did, but the accuracy and visceral portrayal of damage is absolutely phenomenal. There were so many times where I would stop fighting and avoid getting hit to simply marvel at the chunk of brain I just lobbed out, or to see their skin corrode away as zombies walk through caustic pools of death. This is the perfect game for those times you wanted to vent your anger over how your asshole stepdad Jerry, who keeps telling you to call him dad despite not being your real dad, keeps eating your fruit snacks even though he knew that they were yours and how you were saving them for later. I also really appreciated the diversity of environments you encounter. Sure, you're in a city, so there's a limit to the settings available to you, but the effort they went through to give you multiple different set pieces really was much appreciated. Jumping from suburban cul-de-sacs to disco wedding halls, sunny beaches, and morose docks always kept things fresh for the eyes to see. Even the zombies aesthetically and logically matched their surroundings, which felt like a lot of thought and care was put into their designs. Overall, the parts that work really well, mostly thanks to how weighty, visceral, and satisfying the combat system is. It's not Elden Ring levels of combat complexity, but the overall gameplay loop is very fun, enjoyable, and organic. Holy sh**, the writing is so frustratingly bad at times that it genuinely made me want to cry. There are so many plot points in the game that were not thought out at all and just don't make any sense. For instance, there's a scene where one of the survivors you are meeting is sitting on a couch being Mr. Cool Guy when suddenly his head gets ripped off through a window. Naturally, you would assume you're about to be overrun by this brute and all the zombies outside waiting to chomp on hippie brains. But then, he just fucking leaves and nothing happens. I'm sorry, do you mean to tell me that Brutus over here had a fuck that guy in particular moment and then just left because, what, did he forget to take his brownies out of the oven or something? It was such a bizarre scene that I literally had to take a break to digest how utterly nonsensical it was. The next part is half complaint, half compliment. The weapon modification system in this game is such a double-edged sword when it really has no reason to be. The mods you put on weapons look sicker than obese people during COVID. Like genuinely, they are so aesthetically satisfying and appropriate that it never gets old trying to see the different ways your knives and wrenches might turn out. So then please tell me, why in the flying camel fuck are they so mechanically boring compared to the previous game? Literally one of the biggest selling points of this franchise is, hey, here's this perfectly satisfying and actually kind of above average sized knife. What would happen if I tied a lawnmower to it and set it on fire? The first game delivered on that premise so well, but in this one, it felt more like minor stat buffs rather than the Rammstein concert levels of theatrics I was expecting. These next two things, however, were parts that I believe were so utterly unacceptable that they genuinely made me want to stop playing towards the end. I understand this was meant to be an over-the-top, tongue-in-cheek satire of modern Hollywood culture, and I too am a fan of the occasional cringe joke or two. But holy fucking shit, if you are going to constantly be making jokes, at least more than 5% of them need to be funny.
You don't call the lead singer of Gods and Whiskey a has-been.
Damn right.
The correct term is was-been.
Unlike the writing, that is just nonsensical at times, the dialogue in this game is pathetically terrible. For some reason, the people that wrote the dialogue for this game took one look at Borderlands 3 and went, I don't know if it was take your out-of-touch geriatric grandpa to work day that day and they accidentally let them get their hands on the script, but there's really no excuse for anyone to write shit like,
I'm hurt. This is Jacob the Choo-Choo Meister you're talking to.
Before I continue though, I genuinely would like to know down in the comments, if you've played this game, what did you think of the dialogue? Could you bring yourself to force more than a chuckle, or did you also find it to be the sensory equivalent of dragging your nutsack through a field of shattered glass? Next is the skill system. I might sound a little bit performative with this one, but again, the previous game did classes decently well, so I shouldn't have to complain about this. I mentioned earlier how the different slayers have their own stats and a few unique perks. The issue is that any concept of build diversity and variety in this game is such a joke that I really don't even know why they included it at all. Dodge to gain health, maim to hit slightly faster. All of these skill cards felt like the game was asking you, what color of vanilla would you prefer? And really lacked any sense of gameplay diversity until like the last 15% of the game. There are some obvious solutions to the bad problems, like focusing on more consistent writing and not making every line of dialogue the auditory equivalent of waterboarding. However, I personally felt like the biggest obstacle was that it didn't play to its strengths enough. While the actual combat itself was super fun, the whole idea of any sort of build is kind of something you have to force yourself to imagine. When the whole shtick of the game is killing zombies in crazy and exciting ways with different slayers, you would ideally want that experience to feel relatively unique within the first few hours. I honestly wish they did what the first game did, a Borderlands style class system where different slayers have 3 or 4 unique skill trees that target specific builds. If it ain't broken, don't fix it. I also really wish there were moments when the game forced you into more claustrophobic and tense environments. Dead Island 2 is a power fantasy, true, but sometimes it helps to feel a little helpless at times so that those big moments shine even more. A few moments of deeper tension could have really built up the times where you are basically the zombie apocalypse. Regarding weapon mods, the solution is simple. Don't treat them as simple visual or stat changes and actually make them feel unique to play with. There were only 3 damage types that actually felt like they were mechanically rewarding. Everything else was basically just, here's some slight visual changes to extra damage over time, with maybe some minor debuff effects. And then, one last final comment on the dialogue and tone of the game. I get that it's a satire. I hope. But the issue is that they don't make any attempt to distinguish or portray that at all. When everything and everyone is corny, it simply feels like you are unable to actually write any good jokes, rather than doing so with intent. A good model would be to look at the absolute bangers from the Destroy All Humans franchise. They do over-the-top dialogue as well, but in a fun and interesting way.
Wait just a second. How in the world does any of that explain the destruction at the fair?
Doesn't.
All in all, Dead Island 2 is kind of like that really hot girl you asked out in a drunken stupor who, to your surprise, actually gave your sorry ass a chance. It's really fun to play with, will leave you with lots of good memories, and you love to brag about all the cool things you did with it to your friends. But ultimately, it will do random things like set your car on fire without any explanations or insight as to why, leaving you wondering why it never lived up to the expectations that it sold you. But as much as you might complain, you still remember your times with it with fondness and joy. And in the end, isn't that what matters most in life? Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please remember to like and subscribe, as well as to share it with your friends. Otherwise, I hope to see you in the next video, and thank you once again.